Hello, fellow philosopher. It's good to be with people who love wisdom, and I'm glad to be here with you. Today we're talking about loneliness, one of the most painful experiences many people face. Have you ever been surrounded by people and still feel completely alone? Maybe you've scrolled through social media, watched everyone else living what looks like a perfect life, and wondered why you feel so disconnected. Or maybe it's quieter than that. Maybe your kids have grown up and moved away. Maybe a relationship has ended. Maybe retirement changed your daily routine. Maybe you simply reached a point in your life where the phone just doesn't ring as often as it used to. Loneliness has a way of making you feel like you're the only person in the world carrying it. But here's something that might surprise you. People were writing about loneliness over 2,000 years ago. Some of history's greatest philosophers wrestled with the exact same feelings we're talking about today. Now, they didn't have all the answers, but they left behind some wisdom that I think is just as relevant now as it was then. But before we begin, I want to say something important. If you're experiencing severe loneliness, depression, anxiety, or thoughts of harming yourself, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional. Loneliness isn't just emotionally painful. It can have very real effects on both your mental and physical health. This video isn't meant to replace therapy or professional care. My hope is simply to share perspectives that might give you some comfort, encouragement, and maybe a new way of looking at what you're already going through. In the description below, I've included some links which might be helpful. Now, with that said, let's see what the ancient philosophers had to say. Aristotle believes something that I think many of us forget today. He wrote, "People are by nature political animals." Now, when he said political, he wasn't talking about governments or elections. He meant that human beings are naturally made for community. We are wired for connection. That means if you're feeling lonely, it doesn't necessarily mean there's anything wrong with you. In many cases, it means something important is missing. Aristotle went even further when he said, "Without friends, no one would choose to live, though they had all other goods." Wow, think about that. You could have money, success, a beautiful home, everything you worked for your whole life, and still feel empty if meaningful relationships aren't part of your life. I think that's a lesson our culture desperately needs to hear. We're often told that happiness comes from achieving more. Aristotle would probably say it comes from connecting more. Not by collecting more followers, not by getting more likes. Although, if you're finding this video interesting, I would sure appreciate a gentle tap on the like and subscribe button below. In fact, I'm going to take about a 10-second coffee break while you think about it. Okay, enough of that. Let's get back to Aristotle. Now, Aristotle would see connections as the core to happiness. Real friendships, real conversations, real people. So let's move on. What about just plain old pleasure? That's Epicurus' main thing, right? Well, actually, he's one of the most misunderstood philosophers in history. People often assume he believed all of life was about pleasure. But what he actually taught was much deeper. Epicurus believed that one of the greatest sources of happiness wasn't wealth or luxury. It was friendship. He wrote, "Of all the things which wisdom provides to make us entirely happy, much the greatest is the possession of friendship." I love that quote because it's so simple. Notice he didn't say many friendships. He didn't say popularity. He didn't say becoming well known. He simply said friendship. Sometimes we think loneliness will disappear if we meet more people. But maybe that's not the answer. maybe what we're really longing for is one genuine connection. One person who truly knows us. One person we can be ourselves around. Epicurus reminds us that a small circle of authentic relationships can be worth far more than 1,000 acquaintances. Let's, for a moment, look at loneliness from a different direction. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus certainly valued relationships, but he also believed in something incredibly important. He said, "No one is free who is not master of themselves." Here's what I think that meant. If our happiness depends entirely on other people, then we're placing our peace in someone else's hand. That's a difficult way to live. We've all experienced it, waiting for someone to text back, feeling hurt when we're left out, wondering why someone hasn't called. Epictetus wasn't telling us to stop loving people. He was encouraging us to build a relationship with ourselves that doesn't collapse whenever we're alone. There's a huge difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness says, "I have no one." Solitude says, "I can enjoy this moment by myself." One is painful. The other can actually become peaceful. Let's look at another quote. "Associate with those who will make a better person of you." I think many of us have discovered something difficult. It's possible to feel lonely even in a crowded room. It's possible to be surrounded by people who don't really see us. Seneca reminds us that quality matters far more than quantity. One genuine friendship is worth more than dozens of shallow relationships. And here's something I find encouraging. Seneca did not fear being alone. He actually believed periods of solitude could help us reflect, grow, and understand ourselves better. Sometimes we're afraid of being alone because we're afraid of what we'll hear in the silence. But sometimes the silence has something important to teach us. Now, even Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor, often found himself isolated. Yet he reminded himself that no one truly stands apart from humanity. He wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." I love that image. Every bee belongs to the hive. Every person belongs to humanity. Even when you feel disconnected, you still belong. Marcus also wrote something that I think every lonely person needs to hear. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Now, he was not saying positive thinking magically fixes everything. He was reminding us that loneliness often starts telling us stories that are not true. No one cares. I'll always feel this way. I'm forgotten. Sometimes those thoughts feel true, but feelings are not facts. Marcus would encourage us to question those stories before believing them. Now, probably the most unconventional philosopher was Diogenes. He rejected wealth, status, public approval. This guy lived in a barrel. I'm guessing he was alone a lot. But his life teaches us a lesson that's incredibly relevant today. Many people aren't lonely because they're physically alone. They're lonely because they're constantly seeking validation, waiting for someone else's approval, waiting to feel noticed, waiting to feel important. Diogenes reminds us that our value does not come from applause. It doesn't come from popularity. It doesn't come from whether someone else chooses us. Real confidence starts when we choose ourselves. By now you're probably wondering about Confucius. What did he have to say about loneliness? Well, he offered one of my favorite insights. The superior person is not lonely. Virtue always has neighbors. I think that's beautiful. Kindness, integrity, reliability, character. Confucius believed these qualities naturally attract meaningful relationships over time. Instead of asking, why doesn't anyone want to connect with me? Maybe the better question is, how can I become the kind of person others naturally trust? That's a question we actually have control over. And philosophy often begins by focusing on what we can control. So what do all these philosophers have in common? Despite living in different places and in different centuries, they all pointed to the same truth. We need other people. Friendship matters. Connection matters. But they also remind us that peace can't depend entirely on whether someone else is present in our lives. The healthiest life is built on two foundations: strong relationships with others and a strong relationship with yourself. If you're feeling lonely today, I hope you remember this. Loneliness is an experience. It's not your identity. It doesn't define who you are, and it doesn't determine your future. And it certainly doesn't mean you're alone in feeling it. Millions of people carry the same quiet burden, even if they never talk about it. Sometimes healing begins with one conversation, one friendship, one act of courage, or simply a new way of seeing yourself. Maybe that's why the words of these ancient philosophers have survived for thousands of years. Because while the world has changed, the human heart hasn't. If this video has encouraged you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which philosopher's advice spoke to you the most? And if you do know somebody who's been struggling with loneliness lately, consider sharing this video with them. Sometimes a small act of connection can make a bigger difference than we can ever realize. And as always, in all things and at all times, be a philosopher. See you next time.